Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Horner, and I'm the Director of Education at Emory's Michael C. Carlos Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's program. The Carlos Museum's Curator of African Art, Dr. Amanda Hellman, has organized an extraordinary exhibition, And I Must Scream, that features the work of 10 local, national, and international artists who employ monstrous, grotesque, and humanoid figures and forms to engage 5 themes: corruption, human rights violations, displacement, environmental destruction, the pandemic, and renewal. One of those artists, Fabrice Monteiro, is joining us today from Senegal to discuss his photographic series, Prophecy, which is featured in the exhibition. Amanda and Fabrice, welcome to both of you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Fabrice, for coming today for Sunday evening for you. I wonder if we could just begin today with you describing the Prophecy series, how it came to you, and what you're really trying to express in it. Also, I've fielded a lot of questions about the couture, right? Dulcie's amazing gowns. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that as well.
Okay, so how did the Prophecy started? Well, I grew up in Benin, in West Africa, in the late 70s, early 80s. And when I came back to the continent, that was in 2011 in Senegal, I was absolutely amazed by the condition, the environmental condition of the country. I mean, there were garbage everywhere, and I didn't know Africa like that. So it felt to me like globalization had hit the African continent like a train, and nothing was prepared for the Africans to receive such a way of living a modern life. And I felt like, okay, I'm a creative. I can make images. How could I help? How could I create some environmental awareness in the new generation here? Because the new generation, they were born and raised into an environmental chaos, and there's nothing that is teaching them to do the things right or to have just a little tiny environmental awareness. Nothing. So it's totally natural to a Senegalese to throw things out of the window, to throw his garbage right outside of the house. So I felt like, okay, if I can create a tale that is connecting environmental issues with what the people are sensitive in, which is animism and the belief in spirits, maybe I could start to create something of an environmental awareness in the new generation, and maybe they could bring that back home and say, okay, Dad, we cannot throw things outside anymore because the spirit of the plastic said that we have to stop doing that, and we need to be aware of what we are doing. So the idea was to create a tale based on environmental issue from one side, but also animism, mythology, and cultural beliefs. And I do that wherever I go to make a prophecy anywhere. I really start to connect it with the local culture and the local beliefs. And the idea was to literally the idea was to create a story where Mother Earth would wake up one morning totally sick and tired of the situation of the planet, because it took her millions of years to create an environmental that would be viable for the humans, where we could enjoy, where we could breathe and feed ourselves and live a good life. Well, we've been destroying it in the last 200 years with the industrialization. We've been destroying it, and things are not getting any better. So the idea is to bring, so Mother Earth would bring her spirits down to earth, make them appear to the humans, and deliver them a message of awareness and empowerment, saying now you have to do something, because I cannot take care of the planet. I cannot take care of you anymore because you've been too far. You've been too far in the destruction of the environment. You've been too far in this consumption, this way of living that is strictly based on consumption and private property. Now you need to change. You need to be more aware of what is needed on this planet for everybody to live in peace and live together. So I started this project in Senegal. That was back in 2013. And when I basically it was supposed to be, so I pointed out like 9 different environmental topics in Senegal, and I put them in images, which mean that I would figure out the place that is the most representative of each issue. And then with the collaboration of my partner, which is a designer here, I would create a costume based on the material that you can find that address directly that issue and that you could find on the site. And the idea was to address directly to the people. It was very important to me to create images that could talk to anyone, that you don't need to be able to read, or you don't need to be in school or whatsoever, to have an education, to be able to read the image and understand the purpose of it. So I did that for a few years in Senegal. And then when I got the feedback from the articles and the journalist, I felt kind of uncomfortable because he was kind of pointing out the African continent, saying, oh, the environmental issues are terrible in Africa. The situation is terrible. Africa is dirty. And that was not what I wanted to do, because I really believe that we have come to a point that we're confronting a situation that we never had before in human history. And these situations, the only way to come out of it is solidarity. And we really need to start to work together if we want to make this planet a better place. So I felt like, okay, this is about Africa, so let's go elsewhere. I'm going to explore all the continents and address all the original cultures from everywhere, because to me, they are the ones that they have the knowledge of how to live in balance with the environment, which is something that we forgot in the modern world. We totally separate nature from culture, when originally they were intricated. They were working with each other. So the idea is really to reconnect us to the original cultures, the original belief, to those who knows how to live in balance with the environment. So that's the mission that I gave to myself in that series, is to visit as many cultures as possible and create a global prophecy, which would address the whole planet instead of strictly Africa.
I think it's really interesting, because when I started working on this exhibition, I'm the curator of African art. It's the artists and work that I'm most comfortable with. And I started, as I'm tackling some of these issues like corruption and human rights violation and displacement and environmental destruction, I started to feel the same way, that I was suggesting in any sort of way that these are African problems. And that's when I also kind of opened the exhibition up and tried to include artists from elsewhere to say a very similar thing, that these are global issues that really need to be addressed on a global scale. And to that end, I kind of at the last minute included your e-waste, bull monster, because I think this very clearly draws a line between the waste of the global north and the African continent, right? That this very much implicates the fact that we upgrade our phones all the time, that looking at this big pile of box TVs and monitors, which nobody has these kinds of computers anymore, right? They're all flat screens. and I'm not sure if my mom is on here, but I've implicated her in several. I've called her out on several programs because I can remember the box of VHS tapes in our basement. You know, when we had 2 VCRs and we would record, you know, things, and now nobody has a VCR. How do we even use this, right? And so the way in which we're very much tied to, you know, we're mining cobalt in the DRC to be sent to China to produce the batteries for our phones, which come to the US and then a short time later end up in this giant landfill, and how powerful that is to look at your own waste. And that's the difference in Europe and America, and the privilege, right, to not have to see your refuse. And to your point that, you know, growing up, that this isn't what Africa looked like, and now we see really the result of the global North's consumption, I think is just so incredibly powerful and so important, because it is this fine balance, right, where corporations are always, you know, telling us to recycle, and you know, the big push here is to compost, and the reality is that corporations are producing the most waste, that no recycling on my behalf is going to change it, but you know, we are all implicated in some way. And so I think that that's really powerful. I also, you know, love the way in which you describe, you know, sort of Gaia and Mother Earth as calling out. And I reread just several months ago Mother Earth's Gaia's story in Hesiod's Theogony, and you know, she has these children with Uranus, and he doesn't approve of them, and eventually, you know, Gaia gives the children the weapon to turn on Uranus. And what I think is so powerful, you know, about so many of these images of the waste is that, you know, pollution is not loyal to anyone. It's not loyal to the corporation that produced it. And so this idea that their waste is going to turn on them, I think is a really powerful message, you know, in a sense that they are not saved from their children, their sort of pollution monsters. So, you know, I wonder, you know, if you could talk about the way in which using not just the old fishing nets and the sort of waste, but also all of these natural materials, that these creatures are born of the earth, and now sort of rise up, how that becomes an effective tool for us to understand the waste in which we're producing. Why is the human form so important to use? You know, when so many times, you know, we just hear statistics about global warming, right? The temperatures are rising 1 degree. That doesn't really mean a lot, right? Or, you know, here's a scorched landscape where it used to be a lush forest. And you use you know, a human form as your central feature to give this message.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned actually the e-waste image, because yeah, it's very representative of what is happening now. Is that everything started in Africa and everything end up in Africa. So the original idea was to create a diptych out of this image, to make one in Ghana where all the e-waste come end their life, and another one in Congo where all the material to create batteries, to create all these cell phones is, and why there's so much war and so much poverty in a country that is so rich. and it was something like a circling thing, like that we don't realize is that we got into some kind of machinery that takes everything, all the resources from the land, but without any consideration for the human aspect of it. And then we make machines out of it, and make the modern world believe that this is what you need. This is what is going to make you happy. This is what you deserve when you've done your job, and you can now enjoy. You would be happy with that thing. And at the end of the day, and that's not counting the obsolescence, the programmed obsolescence, which is that you use something for a certain amount of time, and then it's programmed to be not usable anymore. And all that stuff come back to Africa. So it was very important for me to put that circle, to put that circle in the face of the viewer. And talking about why did I use the spirits? Well, it started from the idea of in African cultures, even if we are now Christians or Muslim, every one of us has this little animism part in his culture, which is that we still believe in those spirits that would avoid us to cut trees from a sacred forest, that would avoid us to kill a specific animal because it's a sacred animal. All these little laws that were creating balance in the earth, that were creating balance between the human and its environment, they totally disappeared with the modern world. So for me to call out to those spirits and saying that the situation is so bad that all these spirits that we believe in, that we never see, they are appearing now. They are appearing because this is the last chance. This is the last chance for us to realize that the way of living that we choose is not sustainable, and that we have to find a different way to do it. It was a fascinating adventure because, for example, I made that prophecy in Texas with the support of Rice University, and I've been talking to different indigenous people, talking about their culture and how they used to live and how they would like to live. And I was talking to that professor. I forgot his name. Shame on me. But he was saying that it's actually easier for humans to believe in the end of the world than in a changing of the way we are living, in a changing of the way we are approaching others, in the changing of the way we are inhabiting this world, and how we consider every living and even non-living thing on this planet. So we came to that, we've been brought to that mechanic that everything is profit. Everything is usable. You can transform everything in profit. But it's not the case, because by doing that, we totally destroy the natural balance of the planet. And to me, these spirits, they are there to call out to the humans and say, no, you cannot make everything profit. You have to consider that you are part of a whole thing. And you are not outside of that thing, and all these things is just material stuff that you can use for your own benefit. You have to live in balance of it for the benefit of your children, for the benefit of your grandchildren. It's time now to change our approach of living. And ultra capitalism, it's not possible anymore. It's not just that we could think about some alternative or whatsoever. It's not possible anymore. And the thing that in my research that I find interesting is that if you take, for example, the colonization of Africa and how the continent has been divided between the different countries in Europe back in the end of the 19th centuries during the Berlin Conference, they say, okay, we can do that because we are the civilized, we are the civilization, and we have to, how objective is to civilize the rest of the world. And today, I find it very interesting to see that those that were once called savages, that need to be civilized, they own the keys of a balancing living with our environment. And now we have to consider that. Thank God we still have we still have these original cultures on this planet. And I'm not just talking about Africa, because I've been making prophecies in Colombia and been exchanging with the indigenous people there, and in Australia with the Aborigines. And you realize that all these original cultures, they still have this sense of their environment very present in their everyday life, very present. And the only world when that does not exist that much anymore is the modern world, is the Western world. So it feels like now these are the ones that can teach us to do something. And I'm not talking about going back to the age of stone and like, but we have things to learn, and we could come up with something that is balanced in between what the kind of life that has been, I would say, from my side, imposed to us in a certain way, and the life that these original cultures are living. I have the conviction that there is a balance there. And so to answer to your question, that's why I use spirits, because to me, they are really they canalized all these ideas and really bring things together. And that's kind of in French, we say the fil d'Ariane. That's the main line of this project.
That something you said, I mean, I think really touched me with your, and I'm going to just skip ahead, so I apologize, to Prophecy 15. This is your newest one. It's not from 2013. I'm sorry that that's there, but and I was really excited to see you tackle the mangroves, because of course the mangroves are so important for capturing carbon. And I'm going to put a New York Times article here for everyone to see. It's Anya Sabunya, who's a patron of ours. Let's see if it's going to let me. Nope. Can you help me, Elizabeth? Who's a patron of ours, shared a New York Times article with me about the peatlands in the Congo, which also hold an incredible amount of carbon, and if they are disturbed, they will release that carbon into the atmosphere. So not only are they critical for capturing it, and people have been able to live here among the peat forests, among the peatlands for centuries, and now we're going in and cutting down trees and really disrupting it. And the same thing is happening with the mangroves. And so I'm wondering, in a sense, if you could tell us a little bit about this prophecy, but also I think the way in which, when we destroy the environment that is helping us keep things clean as we abuse it, how that's going to accelerate the damage, well beyond our control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can give you factual examples. Okay, let's take the mangrove here in Senegal. So, okay, there's a part of the cutting because the women in the main region for mangrove here in Senegal is Casamance. And traditionally, women used to cut the roots from the mangrove to get the oysters out of it. But that is one thing. But the main issue that the mangrove is going through now is that the rain is the fact that the rainy season is getting smaller and smaller in Senegal. The water is getting more and more salty. So the mangrove has three mainly purpose. It's 30% of the fishery of the world. It's a nursery for 30% of the fishery of the world. It's also protect from the erosion. You know that we have a serious erosion problem in Africa. I mean, we lose something like a meter of coast every year over here. And the third thing is that the mangrove has the capacity to desalinate the water. So it concentrates the salt into their leaves, and then take it out of the water. And the idea here was to bring to create a prophecy that would address directly the local population. So for that, I was inspired by a spirit that is very present in the region of Casamance, which is the Kangurang. It's a character that accompanied the kids in the sacred forest for them to become men. It looks like just to give you an idea, it looks like a big Chewbacca from Star Wars, kind of the figure, and the whole body is made of a certain bark for a certain tree that turns, when it's in contact with the air, it turns orange. That's all that you would see on the picture. That's all the orange stuff that you see on the picture. It's actually that bark. So this Kangurang has that role, and also he had a very important social role. So whenever there is a situation in the village, whenever there is something that is not right, that is not ethically right, the elders pull out the Kangurang. And when the Kangurang comes out, everybody respect what the Kangurang has to say. So just to, that's why it was important for me to use the Kangurang in that figure, because the most important thing every time I create a prophecy is to address the local people, is to pass the message to the local people. Here in Senegal, we have a serious problem of salinization. If you take there's a city here that is called Kaolack that like 60 years ago they were growing rice. Today they live from selling salt. Just to give you an idea of how the things are going. And I'm always amazed when I see how the global warming has the effect are so present. I mean, I've been living in Senegal for 10 years and I've seen the weather changing. Year by year, you can tell how things are changing. You can feel it. And this situation, when on one hand and on the other hand, you have the Western world that is building walls to say we don't want any more migrants in here. We're gonna have a problem, and that's why I'm really solidarity. It's so important in the concept of what I'm doing. Is that if you don't realize that if we don't help each other, I mean we all going into the wall all together. It's really important that the Western world understand that these people who are coming to their doors, they're gonna come more and more, and they don't come because they want to have a TV screen, they want AC, they want to live the comfort of Europe. They come because they have no way of surviving anymore. I mean, the production of rice in Senegal is more and more difficult because there's so much salt in the soil now that it's getting more and more difficult to grow rice. And rice is the first resource, a feeding resource in Senegal. So when we talk about environment, it's important to say that it has origins, but it also has consequences. And one of its consequences is the migrations. And you cannot solve the migration issue until you solve this issue of global warming. And so that's why it's so important to really work on a global scale and make not only the people but also the companies realize that things needs to be different. Otherwise, there would be no issue to that situation.
I think that one of the interesting things that you've really talked about is the way in which the problem is, in a sense, when we see ourselves as humans as the protagonist here. And this exhibition, And I Must Scream, is partly inspired by a short story of speculative fiction, of science fiction called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And I don't read very much science fiction, and I think something that makes me very uncomfortable about it is that you have these incredible worlds that, just utilize all parts of the human imagination that you can't even, as the reader wouldn't have expected. And yet the human is always the protagonist. It's always from the human's perspective looking around. And I think this idea and the solution, as you say, and the solution in the exhibition is really to transform that, to make the human as part of a larger cast of characters, where they live with the earth, the water, the insects, and the animals and the plants, and that does shift your perspective. But as soon as you are able to go from your air-conditioned car to your air-conditioned workplace back to your air-conditioned home, it sort of doesn't matter that there's climate change until you suffocate, right? And your creatures, in a sense, almost always also appear to be suffocating, under their own pollution. That, here they are prophesizing and giving the warning and sending the messages, but they're also struggling to exist. I'm thinking of this is probably maybe your most famous one here, Prophecy 2. But, you can just see, that she almost looks as though she's suffocating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I choose to use, so what I do is that I put a plastic on the face of the model, a plastic bag on the face of the model. And to me, that plastic bag is very symbolic of the situation we are in. Is that, okay, these plastic bags are a few microns plastic bags. You can use them only once. And then they get into the nature. That's the first thing that you would see here. That's the thing that amazed me when I got into Senegal, is that you would see that these black plastic bags everywhere, in the trees, in the earth, in the water, everywhere. Because on the top of everything, African economy is a microeconomy, because people cannot afford to buy food for a whole week or a whole month. So they would go to the shop around the corner and they would buy just what they need for the day. And that need would be contained into a plastic bag. That would be into another plastic bag. That would be into another plastic bag. So it's kind of paradoxal, but the consumption of plastic bags is even more in poor countries. So the idea was really to keep that plastic bag in the whole series as, like you said, as a symbol of suffocation of humanity. We're suffocating under the plastic that we are producing. And that was the original key of creating that series, was that specific plastic bag that is very symbolic of the economical and environmental situation that we are living in here in West Africa.
If I could, before I saw the Prophecy series, I saw your Maroon series. And what struck me most, I think, once I made the connection, and I think your imprint is very distinct. You have a very diverse portfolio, but I very much see your aesthetic travel from one series to another. And so I pretty quickly made the connection that this series was by the same photographer as the Prophecy series. And as I started to make that connection, I really saw you making a much more holistic statement about brutality, about the brutality of human beings and the brutality of the earth, and the connection of those two things is the human, in a sense. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this series and how you see it as part of, and as connected to the Prophecy and perhaps a part of a larger lineage of work.
Well, this series was my very first series. It was my very first series. I did it back in 2010. And that series has for origin my name. I'm wearing a Portuguese name, which is Monteiro, which is not my original name, because my family, okay, I'm half caste. My mother is Belgian, my father is Beninese. And my original name was Yoruba and was coming from Nigeria. So the story is that my ancestor back in the 16th century was brought to slavery by the Portuguese, and he was brought to Brazil. And in the same life, he came back because he started to work for the slave master. So he came back, and apparently those who kept this, many of, you would have many Portuguese names in Benin, and they are called the Agudas, those who left and came back. And those Agudas back in the 16th, 17th centuries, they were the one who work as intermediary between the sellers, which would be eventually the king of Dahomey, and the buyers, which would be either the Portuguese or the French or the English or the Dutch. And they kept that name. They kept that name because it was giving them a statue. Even though they knew the original name, they would keep that name. So when my father told me the story of my family, I was shocked because I never appreciated that way. And I realized that I needed to do something about it. And the thing is that I wanted to create a series where to give back a human face to all the lithographies and all the drawings that you would see in history book about slavery. I wanted to give contemporary faces to it, because the people that you would find in Haiti, in Cuba, in the States, in all the Caribbean, a lot of them came from the place where my family is from, which is Ouidah in Benin. And so I was very interested in having the original faces and original features of these people. So I did this. Okay, first I went to do some research on all the shackles that they used to put on the slaves so they cannot run through the fields. They could not eat. They could not drink. So I had it. I made some research of it in Paris, and then I drew them down. I made blueprints of them, and I had them done in Benin. And they were done so easily by the blacksmiths in Benin that it came to me like, I think the first pieces of those things were actually, they were probably made here in Africa. And I put these shackles, I did a street casting, and I put the shackles around the neck of a few humans. And it's very interesting to give reality to something, because you realize how painful it must have been. These shackles are very heavy, and the contact of the metal with the skin is hurting. So as soon as I would put the shackles on the models, I would see them start to sweat and look very like heavy from the weight of the piece. So that's one thing that makes you realize that how can a human being do that to another human being? Just I mean, in the name of nothing else but profit. That was the first shocking realization. And then you realize that it goes further than that. It's to justify the treatment of human beings like that. They started to use science. They started to use all kind of way to say that it's normal. The French created a code which was called the Code Noir, and with rules how the slaves would need to be treated. And you realize that everything is connected. So when you're asking me what is the connection with what I did then and what I do now, you realize that the environmental situation that we are in now comes from the creation of us, the destructions by the Western world of the known world of these people, of these indigenous people, and bring them a world that was not made for them, but was made for the wealth of a few European rich men. They would bring millions of African, after exterminating the local people, they would bring millions of African and work in those plantations. So they turn how would I say that? They turn an economy that was balanced and that was respectuous of an environment into a monoculture, into plantations. And that's why I like a lot the term of plantationocene instead of Anthropocene, because to me, the notion of Anthropocene is very vague. It's addressing the effects of the human being on the actual era that we live in. But there's more than that. There is a system that has been creating for 5 centuries. And the consequences of that system is what we are going through today. Because things didn't end up with the end of slavery or the end of colonization. The system still was still there until today is still there. And if you take the example of the French Caribbean, for example, they transform all the local gardens where people have different variety and things to sustain what they needed for living and to eat, into massive plantations. And adding to that some chemicals to produce more. And today in the West Indies, for example, if you take Guadeloupe or Martinique, the people in Martinique, it's been said that more than 80% of the people still have chlordécone in their blood. And chlordécone was something that was put into the land to grow bananas in the West Indies. So you see how everything is connected, and how the domination of a certain population on another, and their extraction for their environment into another environment to produce wealth for a very few people in another from another continent, create this kind of disbalance on the planet, and this continuing situation where a certain world needs to sustain its way of living, so cannot give up on certain ways they have on the continent. If you take Africa, for example, we're still living in a neo-colonialist system. I mean, it's obvious because a country like France, for example, to be the 4th most powerful country, needs the resources of the African resources that they used to have in colonization time, and they still have now. So to me, when I talk about environment or identity or slavery, to me, it's all connected. It comes down to a certain paradigm. It comes down to a certain system that has been destroying the planet through the way that we decided to live on Earth. And now the irony of the story is that to get back to something that is more balanced, we need to come back to this original population, to these original cultures that had the knowledge, that had the sense of balance, that knew how to live in harmony with their environment. So to answer to your question, yes, everything in my work is very connected, and now I think the environmental issue is kind of the paroxysm of this mechanic. The fact that now we come to a point that either we accept the situation and we change it, or we just say carpe diem and we go all the way until there's no turning back.
And I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for questions, but I wanted to tell this story that these are the first works that I saw by you at Descartes in 2014. And Descartes has a component called OFF, and which is essentially kind of pop-up installations all over the city. And in 2014, there were about 300 different OFF venues, but yours, and please correct me, I was looking for my notes and my images and I couldn't find them. So correct me if I get this totally wrong, but yours was at, it was a construction site, a building that was being built over this gas station. And it was kind of beautiful. It was a very white cube. It had these windows, so there was lots of natural light. And this series was huge. They were larger than life. And and so it was maybe a series of 5, and then a construction worker would be carrying drywall through the space. And it was so impactful because several of the figures are making this direct eye contact, and it's incredibly powerful. And it made me sort of think about how you want your work to be seen, because I saw a series in a magazine, and then I saw this where the photos were so big that you were just enveloped by the figures. And then when I was looking to exhibit the prophecy, your gallery Magnanet said, well, what size do you want? And I sort of picked a size that I felt would be really impactful for the space. And so I'm wondering if that is meaningful. We're exhibiting in this place that is not a typical way to encounter art becomes important. Or if maybe you have no opinion, you like it all because it all sort of reaches you in a different way.
Well, that series specifically was it's in the same vein. So the original idea was to visit all the, the fact that I'm half caste, the fact that I'm in between 2 cultures, that I was raised as much European as I was raised African. Gave me a different perspective, because when I'm in Africa, I'm seen as a white man, and when I'm in Europe, I'm seen as a non-white man. So you create your own perspective, you create your own word, you create your own vision of the world outside, and creating that series was to me a way of interrogating all the images and the cliches. The cliches, how would you call that? The way the religions have been represented, and to revisit them and give them different inspiration, just to interrogate the viewer about exactly about stereotypes and all these images that have been imposed to us, and that we don't think, it doesn't go through the filter of our reason. It's just there, and it has an influence back there. It has an influence on our vision of the world. Just to give you a concrete example, I grew up in Benin, in an African country where everybody around me was Black, and then you would see in front of churches this huge cross with a pink Jesus on it. And every Sunday, people would go to church and pray to that pink Jesus. And as far as I can remember being a kid, I was always amazed by that pink Jesus. And later, I started to wonder, knowing my position as a half-caste person, not this, not that, and the importance of the fact that my skin is that color. What is the impact of such a thing on African people when they come every Sunday to pray a figure that doesn't look like them? So the idea here was really to interrogate that, and that's the same idea when I talk about slavery, or it's a matter of, we've been creating a certain image of the other, and we never reinterrogated it. Through centuries, we never reinterrogated. We never. I remember being to school in Africa, and I mean we didn't talk about slavery literally. We would just take things as, okay, this is how it is, and you don't interrogate anything anymore. So presenting to the viewer something that would make him interrogate himself about the image, about those images that he has for acquired, and that there's never any question asked. And then you see this image when you would take, I would take something from Islam, and then I would take an albinos, which is not when you far, it looks like it's a white person, and then when you get closer, I know it's a black guy, but it's albino. It's just a black guy that doesn't have melanin. And taking also from the animist cultures here and putting all these things together, to me was a way to say, okay, let's interrogate ourselves about all these images, all these ideas that we've been carrying from generation to generation, and we never interrogate and say, what is the impact of that thing on my everyday life? Because it has an impact, and I really believe that we have to come to a point where the new generation we need to offer them the possibility to interrogate those ideas, to criticize those ideas, to reconsider those ideas, because that's the only way to recreate a human community that is more balanced, I would say. So when I create that, I like to, when I show this kind of series, I like to have really big sizes, because it's imposing. It's asking the viewer, can you see yourself in there? Does it awake any thought in you? Are you reinterrogating your vision of religions, or your vision of the other, of black men, or black and white, or any color? It's something that is very important in my work. Whenever a lot of my series are based on that principle of reinterrogating things that have been imposed to our mind through the centuries, and that we never really questioned.
Before I turn it over to audience questions, I think that the conditions in which you have to photograph the prophecy series, it's not a studio portrait like this series. The conditions are pretty horrible, and are conditions that most of us can't face or don't want to face. And I'm wondering if you would tell us kind of the backstory, or what it was like to photograph you can pick any photograph from the prophecy series that you would like. But the story, whenever I hear you talk about it or read about it, it's always very interesting. So I'm wondering if you could give us kind of the background of any one of the series, and I can flash to it.
Yes, I would. Yeah, we could talk about any, but maybe let's get out of Africa and take the one that I've done in Texas, like right before COVID, which is the prophecy number 14. So the idea of that prophecy was based on something that I heard on the radio. Was that there is a place in Texas called Eagle Pass, and that little town, they have a huge coal mine. They have a huge coal mine. When they extract coal, and then they put it on trains. They open wagon trains. They send it through the city, across the border, and then they burn it on the other side in Mexico, in one of the dirtiest coal plant that is in that hemisphere. And to me, and so not only they pollute, they create the conditions of transportation are very bad for the population, because the rails are just going through schools and where children are playing, playgrounds and all that stuff. But also, the important thing to me was that they start to dig on the land that was sacred to the indigenous people, because they had buried ancestors there, because they were archaeological sites, because the thing is that they would dig and take the bones out and just throw them away. And to me, that was the perfect example. That was the perfect example of that confrontation between that modernity, which is about profit, and then the original culture, which is the indigenous people of America, who still have the belief in their ancestors, who still worry about their ancestor, who still worry about their culture, their original culture. It was a perfect opportunity for me to show the confrontation between these two topics. Originally, I wanted to do it on the Main. It was impossible. And then I tried to do it on the land across the Main that was owned, because everything is private property, of course, in Texas. The guy said yes, and then 2 days before I planned to do the image, he said, no, I don't want you to come and do that image there. This is something that I have a lot of time. I mean, most of the time, people don't want you to know what is going on. People don't want you to see what is going on. People don't want you to talk about what is going on. So we had to create that prophecy, change all the concept and create that prophecy in a different place, close to the Main, but a different place. And the idea of that prophecy was to create that, to have an image of that original dance that the indigenous people were making. Wherever they would come somewhere, arrive somewhere, they would give a dance to give thanks to the land that were going to receive them. And then they would spend some time there, and then they would go somewhere else to give that land the space to recover from humans. And talking to tribe chiefs in Texas, they were all telling us that we used to live like that, but today it's impossible because everything is private property. So you cannot move anymore. You park somewhere and you have to live and consume that land from beginning to end, because there's nowhere else to go and you don't have the chance to recover. So back to that dance is called the grass dance. And that was a dance that they would do every time they arrive somewhere to honor the land and give thanks for what they would they would get out of that land to live for a certain time. So to me, that was the perfect example of what we live in, is that confrontation between the modern world and the original cultures who knew how to live a sustainable life.
And I'm sorry, I got sloppy with my dates, because I do think one of the important parts of this project is that it is ongoing, and that it's been going on for, about 10 years. So this was at 2019.
Yeah, that was 2019, absolutely.
Okay, there are a couple questions. The first is from Eric House. What artists in your journey were inspirations to you and how you approach art?
That's a question that I have often. Well, I see things. I think the most thing that, if we talk about that series, the thing that inspired me the most, I think is my own experience, because I was raised in the cradle of voodoo. The Benin is the cradle of voodoo. So growing up, I've been seeing a lot of voodoo ceremonies. So I have this animist part in me. And then being a kid, I was a fan of superheroes. I was a fan of comics. So I think that at a certain point, the two aspects of my culture came together to create those characters. And it's really, I think it's really what Half Caste is about, is that you would take something from I would take something from my African side, and I would take something from my European side, and then mix it together and create something that looks very much like me. So basically, that's what I mostly do in my work.
Another question is, I read an article in which Monteiro said Africans should be driving Africans' renaissance. And Elizabeth writes, I am curious to hear your thoughts about China's Belt and Road Initiative in China.
China Belt and Road Initiative in China?
In Africa, sorry. All of the construction and the way in which they're financing so much of the infrastructure. Is that right, Elizabeth?
Yeah. Well, the influence of Chinese here is yes, it's a bit worrying, but at the same time, it gives you know, for centuries, the Europeans, they didn't have any rivals in Africa. They didn't have anyone to compete with in Africa. And the fact that now the Chinese come and say, okay, we come into Africa, but we want to do things like a win-win, like we take something, but we give you something. When the Europeans were like, oh, we take in, but we bring in you civilization. We bring in you roads. We bring in you, even so it was just for their own purpose. We bring in you roads. We bring in you this. We bring in you that. So now you have the situation when there is a competition between the two, and I think the moment really has come for Africa and Africans to realize that they are very powerful. If the African continent would come together and go more into Pan-Africanism and realize that they have all these resources and they could work with it on equal level with all the other continent and the other culture, I think Africa will definitely be the next continent coming up. And I think it has to be, because the new generation is more and more aware. The fact that we have internet, the fact that we can access information, that we don't have to take what is said to us for granted, but we can make our own research. You can see that there's a new movement in Africa. There's a new movement of people who are aware, who are conscious of what this continent has and what this continent can bring to the world. And the great thing is that we are not so much involved into the modern economical ways that we can reinvent us. We can reinvent something using our original cultures and the modern world. There's something there where we can find a balance to make this continent really come out and be not seen as the poor continent, the dark continent, the continent where the wars are, which is the image that the Western world is projecting on us, but it's not the case. That is not reality. So yes, the Chinese are here. Yes, the Chinese are taking advantage, and I could give you thousands of examples of that. Only talking about the fisheries, there's a crazy situation here about fisheries and Chinese boat and Korean boats coming to get all the fish out of the water on the coast of Senegal. But on the other hand, there are a lot that can be done by the population here to get out of that system of dependence that have been created through the years, through colonization, through having politics in power that were chosen or that don't really work for the people, but work for their own wealth. There is definitely, Africa is going to come out of that darkness. I really.
Well, I have to say that was actually an inspirational sort of note to end on, and we're about time, and it looks like we've lost Fabrice. Thank you all for coming. Oh, there he is. I was just saying that's actually a great note to end on. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope that you come and see the show, which is through May 15th. And have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.